everyone. Hi, listeners. This is Kathy. We are the Edge of Stone sisters, Sarah and I, and we have a very exciting episode today. We have a really exciting topic and also an extra added element. So Sarah's going to tell you all about it. What's happening, Sarah?
Yes, I'm so excited for two reasons, many reasons, but especially two. One is we have our very first guest.
Yay!
Absolute first guest. So I'm super excited. This is episode 7, and we decided to add this new element. And the new element is my brother, David Latufo. He is here with us. We are so lucky. And the topic, I'm also excited that it's my brother, and I'm excited about the topic, which is travel. David has traveled to all 7 continents. And I believe he told me over 80 countries, massive traveler, very adventurous, has wonderful stories. And without further ado, we welcome you.
Yay!
David. Yes, thank you. Hi.
Yay, this is so exciting. So before we dive into the topic together, I just want to say, David, that you have now become the first Edge of Stone brother.
Okay.
So congratulations to you.
Yeah. Not just sisters anymore. Yeah.
Not just sisters anymore. No.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
So true.
Anything you want to say before we start badgering you with questions?
Well, just overall, I've traveled extensively all throughout my life. I started as a kid, really, with my parents who used to take me to Florida. And I think I took my first international trip in high school as part of the high school trip to the Caribbean, and got the travel bug pretty early and have been going to different places ever since, usually 2 or 3 places a year. So that's where it all started.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. I do want to jump in and say, David, if we both have some questions lined up, but it's fine if we don't get to all the questions. So I want you to feel free if you go off into stories or you have some questions, or just free flowing.
Okay.
We're not worried about getting to all the questions. I have a feeling we may have to have you back. I already have that feeling. We could start with some questions if you're willing, but then let it go wherever it goes.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So recently we did an episode on animals, and I am a huge animal lover. So one of my questions is, can you describe one of your best animal adventures in all your travels?
Yes, well, I've done a few safaris to Africa, but I would say my favorite animal trip was to Tanzania. That's where you see all sorts of wildlife. It's just incredible in the savannah there. It's so it was just animals everywhere, the usual elephants and but usual birds and all sorts of things to see there. Yeah. Probably the second closest runner up is going to Australia, because it's always cool to see the kangaroos, And
Yeah.
to a kangaroo park, and there are kangaroos everywhere, and they're actually kind of friendly. They come right up to you, and they're big, so it's a little intimidating. Yeah.
What about koalas?
Amazing.
Yes, I did see koalas. Now, koalas are a little shyer than kangaroos, and they like to hang out in eucalyptus trees. And so you need sort of binoculars for them. But if I did have lunch once, and there they were, like 300 feet high in the eucalyptus trees, which I could see with my binoculars very well. Yeah.
Cool.
That trip to Australia, we went to Kangaroo Island, which, I was going to bring this up, in my talk with you, is that the world keeps on changing, because Kangaroo Island was beautiful, but now has been devastated by those fires, which wiped out half of the island. So hopefully it's recovering now. But the fires there really did a lot of damage to that place that I visited many years ago. So I'm sure it's not quite the same just yet, and probably will take years to recover. Yeah.
That affected the animal population there, obviously. you would
Well, they
think.
lost a
So,
lot of animals, and I think I understand, at least with Kangaroo Island, they lost about half of the island, but half was saved, and hopefully the half that will save will eventually repopulate the other half of the island. Something like that can take 10 or 20 years. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So, and there was a lot of loss of life and burned trees, and it's devastating, of course. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
But forests can recover given enough time and protection too. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
So
I had an Africa follow-up question. So
yeah,
in Africa, were you camping out? Was it like safari camping? I know a friend of mine did it that way, where they were actually
yeah.
camping out.
So I did two different ways. Now in Tanzania, they do have those nice. We did camp, but it's luxury camping. It's not like you bring your own camp gear and find a site. They have beautiful areas that are all set up for you with tents and bunk beds and table service and everything. So it's like high end camping.
Mhm.
But I've also done something very interesting on another one of my African safari trips, which was to Namibia and the Namib Desert. And there are no hotels where we were. We just took a van, and this was one of my very best travel experiences. Uh, we camped out under the stars in sleeping bags. Yeah, and that was just amazing. Yeah, and plus Namibia is one of the darkest places in the world. They have a very dark sky. So if you like astronomy, you'll just be blown away by the sky there. It's just there's no light pollution at all. It's zero. Yeah, it's the only place in the world that I think it comes close to having no light pollution whatsoever.
Wow. That sounds so beautiful.
Yeah. While I'm on the topic, I will bring the three. Well, the best dark sky experiences I've had would be Namibia, and the middle of Australia is also very good. And I would say, if in the U.S., some parts of the out west, in the west part of our country, national parks are a good bet too. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, actually, the only time that I felt like I saw the entire sky was in the Keys, which also very, very low light pollution. And
Yeah.
also because they're like sitting there in the middle of the ocean, you kind of see the whole dome, which is also really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Out on the ocean, you would see amazing stuff too. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So another interesting camping trip that I did, which I did during the pandemic year. So remember, that was a year, 2020, where you couldn't do anything. Yeah, but I was supposed to go to Scotland. That got canceled. But there actually was one tour that they were offering, and that was rafting down the Colorado River. And it was all outside, and it was a enclosed group of 9 people plus 2 guides. And they took all sorts of protection, and we had our own utensils and camping stuff. And we had a wonderful time. It was kind of nice to escape from the world during that time when everything was going so crazy. And we got to spend 9 days on the river. It was fabulous. And then came back to the reality of the pandemic, of course. But those
Right.
9 days were just an escape from it all. And it was great. And when the sky was there, was great too. And the Perseid meteor shower was happening at the same time. So again, you're sleeping in sleeping bags and watching the shooting stars go right over the canyon. It was totally amazing.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to switch gears here and ask you about food. So, along with animals, food, another important
Okay.
topic. Most unusual or the best, just what is in terms of just looking at the whole world of food.
Yeah, well, I guess my funniest story it was when I was in Beijing, China, and they eat all sorts of crazy things in China, as you know, and you can't read the menu, so you don't really know what you're getting. And I'm still having a rough time eating insects. They eat scorpions there and crickets and all sorts of stuff. Cockroaches are also for sale. I couldn't get myself to do it. I'm sorry. I I faded out on that one. However, I did want to get breakfast one morning, and I looked for the safest thing I could find, which looked to me from the picture was a bowl of oatmeal. I go, good, I'll have some oatmeal porridge. That's safe. And I got it, took it to my seat, and they put worms in their oatmeal. So that was.
Oh my gosh.
My surprise.
Did you didn't eat it? You didn't
I
eat it?
tried to pick out the worms a little bit and just ate the oatmeal.
Oh my goodness. So you're in a place where you can't read the menu.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it sounds like they had pictures.
They had pictures, but the pictures didn't show the worms.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But in general, if you can't read the menu, like how do you order?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time I take my tours I take my trips on an organized tour. Yeah, it's very rare for me to go on a faraway trip on my own. Although in that situation with China, I had gone alone. But if you have a guide, they usually can translate for you and tell you what's on the menu. So that's the easiest way, obviously.
Right.
I have some broken Spanish that I know, and I can read a little bit of that. And my French isn't very good, but sometimes I'll use my broken languages to try to ask what it is. The pictures certainly help.
Yeah.
The food is that's one of the reasons to travel, right? Is
Sure.
food experience, which is quite different around the world. Now, another place that was fabulous for food that I didn't really go there for the food, but it ended up being quite a culinary trip was Japan, because they have all sorts of different ways they cook their food there. You know, sometimes they grill it, sometimes you cook it yourself at the table. And then, of course, there's the Buddha way of eating where you sit on the floor and it's all vegetarian. And I tell you, it's some of the best vegetarian food I've ever had. It was just fabulous. And the many different settings about food, the trip to Japan almost became a culinary trip, I would say. It was fabulous. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, I didn't go for that reason. I wanted to see the sights of Japan, but I would say one of the top things about Japan is its food and the way they prepare it. And they do it differently in different regions. And each region is known to create food a certain way. Yeah.
Mm.
Another great food place was Slovenia. I did a trip there, and that was a culinary trip. That we rode bikes from one place to the other, but we stopped at great restaurants that were all top-notch places where they had like 10-course meals. They weren't big portions, so you could have a taste of everything. And it has a mixture of Austrian and Italian food because they sort of sit in the middle of the two places. So that was a really interesting place for food too. I say, the food has gotten better over there across the world. Like you wouldn't think that like England would have good food, but they do now. They have a lot, especially in London. They have all sorts of different ethnic food. And yes, I went to Scotland this summer, just got back 2 weeks ago, and I did try the haggis. Yeah.
Oh,
And
geez.
it wasn't bad. Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't bad.
You not only tried the haggis, but I saw the pictures on Facebook where you were part of the ceremony of bringing in the haggis, right?
Right. Well,
I was praying you didn't drop it.
I said to myself, I think when I get over there, I'll try the haggis, and then our tour leader says, hey, we typically there's a ceremony to present the haggis. I had no idea. They bring a guy with bagpipes and they proceed to sing music and play music and present the haggis behind the bagpipe. And she asked me if I would do it. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And I walked around the table with the haggis terrified, of course, of dropping it, but I managed to not trip on my laces and got the haggis presented to the table. We all had some, and it was fabulous. The ceremony was even part of the fun, I think. Yeah, yeah.
It looked like so much fun, but now that leads me to a personal question,
Okay.
which is, I notice from being, hearing your stories and seeing the pictures, and I've noticed over the years, it's so exciting to see this. You tend to wind up in the spotlight. You tend to wind up in the middle of wonderful things. You tend to wind up on stage even. Recently dancing, I believe. Can you tell me, how does that happen so frequently?
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I'll stand out in a crowd, I guess. The trip to Scotland that was just recent was part of we went to the military tattoo, which is this big military parade in Edinburgh. And then also they have the Fringe Festival there, which is a huge festival of arts and comedy acts. It's been going on since I think 1947. I just saw a show on it, and it's grown tremendously. So I did sign up to go to a comedy act, and I was supposed to be traveling with a lady friend. This is one of the things that does happen when you travel. Unexpected things do happen. And she got sick at the last moment and couldn't go. So I went myself and tried to keep a low profile, but I made the mistake of sitting in the front row. And when the other guy refused to get on stage, people immediately started pointing to me. How about him down there? So, of course, I did go up, and I got on stage with the comedian, and he kind of picks on you a little bit, and then he makes you do these kind of crazy dances that are kind of somewhat obscene, but that's his gig, and it was kind of fun. It was fun. I didn't really mind or be embarrassed because there were 200 people that I'd never see before and never see after, so I could do whatever I want to. So I said, yeah, it's kind of nice when you travel to let your hair down a little bit and just go with the flow.
So I love seeing it. I love seeing the pictures and what happens with you. I know there's always going to be another adventure like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So David, like, you're not afraid you're going to wind up on social media?
Yeah, I mean, I post my own pictures on social media. I'm not really that concerned. Yeah, I mean, I think when you travel, you do try to. I mean, one travels for the experiences. Really, you want something exciting to happen, and I look for that. My trips are very varied. Some are adventure trips, some are cultural trips, some are culinary trips. So they're all different kinds of things. But I kind of do look for the sense of adventure. With the adventure trips, I've done that bungee jump off the Queenstown Bridge in New Zealand, and that's something when you go to New Zealand you have to do. So you get online, and there you are. And then they say 1, 2, 3, jump, and then you have to jump, and it's pretty scary. But you have that was a tour, so I had the other people on the tour to encourage me to do it. Yeah.
Was that one of the scariest things that you've done traveling?
That was probably the scariest adventure thing that I had to do, because it's up there like 300 feet, and it's not easy to jump off 300 feet at all. Yeah. There's an inertia there when you look down. But the guide was very helpful. He says, don't look down, look straight at the horizon. And that is the key to success. Yeah. So there've been a lot of biking trips and a lot of hiking trips. I did a hiking trip through Tuscany, and that was also culinary. So we had some incredible food outside. Just so many different things to do when you go to different parts of the world, Certainly, you've done a lot of kayaking, sea kayaking, hiking, skiing, a variety of activities. Yeah. But I'm one that can do anything. I can also do the museum trips too. I'm perfectly comfortable enjoying a city and going to museums as well.
So exciting. You've done all this travel, and it's so many amazing places. So I'm wondering, if you were going to live outside of the United States, are there one or two places that, just in your fantasy, are there one or two places that would call to you?
Yes, well, the places that I thought were exceptionally clean and easy to live in as a country would be New Zealand, for example. It's just, especially the South Island, it's just gorgeous and beautiful and very unpopulated and a lot of outdoor activities to do. That would be high on my list if I ever left the USA. Another place I liked was where I just visited, which was Scotland, which was just an amazingly clean and prosperous country. Just very well organized and very nice. Yeah.
Kathy, I'm curious about what Kathy would say. Kathy, where would you live outside of the United States?
Well, I haven't been that many places, for one thing, but I do think I would lean toward Ireland. Interestingly enough, two of my kids have been to Ireland, and that's going to be my next trip. And I just have a feeling that I would be comfortable there, and I've heard it's beautiful. What about you, Sarah?
Well, when I went to, I haven't traveled out of the country a lot. I've traveled in the country a lot, but not outside the country a lot. But when I went to St. John, in the Virgin Islands,
yeah, I've been to St. John.
I fell in love.
Yeah.
I just fell in love.
Yeah, I have to say,
So-
John and I were fantasizing about buying a house in St. John after we were there.
Yeah, I totally got me. Oh my goodness. I loved it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I have other thoughts, but I love, if I could just live for a few months in a city, I'd love to live in Toronto.
Yeah, I haven't been yet.
I love Toronto.
Uh-huh. Well, interestingly, the two places that I have been are Paris and London. And I don't want to live in either of those places.
Right. Okay, David, tell me where I should go. I'll tell you some things I like. Think about, well, let's plan, let's plan our trip. Where should Kathy and I go?
Well,
We love
I think-
beach. We love beach, museums, great food. What else, Kath?
Ocean, like not just beach. I want to swim in the ocean.
Ocean. I agree.
yeah.
Ocean.
Everyone should really see the major capitals of Europe. That should always be high on the list. Paris, London. Don't forget Rome. Rome is one of my favorite cities of all. Also Berlin, Spain. I mean, they're all great places I would recommend.
Have you been to Lisbon?
Lisbon, yes, I've been to Lisbon. Yeah. That's one of the places where I did have a bad experience. And then that was one of the things I wanted to mention, that you have to be prepared for things that sometimes go wrong when you travel. And in that situation, we weren't, as it turned to be, it wasn't as bad as it could have been, but we did get mugged in Lisbon, and someone tried to steal our wallets at knife point. Now, fortunately, we were right in front of our hotel. Yeah, and the doorman saw it and unlocked the door, and we pushed them to the side and got in with our wallets, and he ran away. So you got to be prepared for those kind of things too. Yeah, that can happen. But for beaches, that's a hard choice because we have so many nice beaches right here in the US. Yeah. So I tend not to do beach vacations, but I would say, I guess, probably like places like the Bahamas or the Caribbean are probably better than anywhere else in the world. Australia has beaches, but unfortunately you can't go swimming there because they have these little jellyfish the size of your fingernail that are deadly. Yeah. You have to go out on the Great Barrier Reef and go scuba or snorkeling, where these deadly jellyfish don't live out there 6 miles on the reef. But you forget about swimming off the coast, because a lot of times you have to worry about the jellyfish. Now, I think down near Sydney, they don't have them because you can go to Bondi Beach and places like that. But where we were in Queenstown, you can't go to the beach there.
And that's ongoing? Like that's happening all
It's
the time?
ongoing. Yeah. They
Wow.
have signs out. Yeah.
Wow.
In order to go swimming in the ocean there, you have to go take a boat and go 6 miles out past the jellyfish to the reefs. And that's where you can do your swimming there. but once you get to the reefs, it's fabulous. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, Europe is not too good for beaches, and much of Asia is not really great for beaches either. So, and South America, I think that the U.S. and the Caribbean are your best bets for beach vacations.
I've been to the Caribbean a few times. So I wouldn't think of it as like, I'd like to think about going new places, but we would have such a great time, Sarah.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
No,
I
I suggest Hawaii too. If you've never been to Hawaii, that should be a
Yeah.
trip. And try the different islands. Like Kauai is gorgeous, the Big Island. I've been to both of those. They have incredible beaches. Yeah.
That's a good, yeah, I remember that now. My other question, I need to hire you as a travel guide. Don and I, our big thing is within a couple of years going to Italy. And we know about Rome. We know that we have to give Rome its due time. But we're probably going to have time to go. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. So we have time to go to Rome and one other place in Italy. Where should we go?
Most people that do that trip do Florence. Yeah, Florence it's not
Oh.
that far away, and it's easy to put those two cities together. And Florence will blow your mind away. It's just medieval splendor everywhere. And of course, if you can do it, you can maybe even get Venice in there, because Venice is a fascinating place.
I have an issue with Venice. Listen, I have a problem with something. I am terrified. Now we're talking about high phobia of pigeons.
Oh,
I am a friend of mine went to Venice and sent me a picture. The pigeon was on her head.
yeah.
Now listen, I love animals, but I would be in the hospital if a pigeon goes on my head. I have such a phobia. So that means I have to avoid certain places.
Well, yeah. Well, don't travel with a friend that likes to put pigeons on you, because when I took my trip there, my friend David, who I travel with, put pigeons on me all the time. So I don't have the same phobia, apparently. But yeah, there are pigeons everywhere, and they will get right in front of you, but you can avoid them. So I think if you just wear a nice big hat and
Yes. Yeah. It's
And-
it's an
and don't put
opportunity for a
any-
very creative hat.
yeah, don't put any food or anything on your hat or body parts, and you should be okay. And you'll just have to shoo them away. But yes, there are a lot of pigeons in Venice for sure. They're all over the place. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I may need opera gloves too, not just the hat, but like the long elbow, the gloves.
Some gloves
also.
and a big hat and
And
sunglasses.
maybe at this point, maybe an astronaut
Yeah.
suit. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out. I'll
Yeah.
be asking you this again when we go.
Right. They generally they pretty much mind their own business, the pigeons. So unless are encouraging them, they'll probably stay away from you.
Do they bother you in New York, Sarah?
Oh, yes. That's why I have this phobia. As a child, I remember walking to school or walking home and seeing this dead pigeon. And as a little child, that's what terrified me.
Mm.
That's what terrified me. Yeah. Speaking of things that don't always go right, what about airplane? What's your worst airplane or train story?
The worst story was when I was flying back from London, and it really scared me. And I don't know really what happened, but I had gotten to Heathrow 4 hours before my flight. 4 hours. And it was a time of heightened security, because I think it was right around the time of 9/11. And so I had to go through, I think, no less than 4 lines of security. And I was very happy about all those security checks. But by the time I got through the last security gate, my flight, which I had a nice window seat up front in the plane, took off. So they had to rebook me. And so there was a flight, fortunately, 2 hours later. But I had a middle seat on the last row, which you never want to do if you can avoid it. But that was the only way I could get home. And I'm sure a lot of travelers get stuck with that when their flights get bumped and they have no other choice. So not only is it noisy and hot back there, but something happened because I went back to use the restroom and I saw one of the flight attendants crying and a whole bunch of flight attendants trying to console her. And they had the curtains drawn and I wasn't supposed to see, but I had to go to the bathroom. So I think I saw something that I shouldn't have seen. And I actually got scared that there was like a bomb threat on the plane. So for the next 2 hours, I was besides myself in fear, watching that clock, hoping that we were going to make it down in time. And I was just terrified. It was like the worst 2 hours. I was just, and I couldn't tell anybody because no one else really but me had seen this, like, something had happened. I don't know if it was a bomb scare or not, but something was definitely bothering some of the flight attendants. They were in a panicked situation. And of course, they're not going to tell you. Yeah. So I guess that was one of the worst flights that I had. And of course, I've gone through a lot of turbulence, and that's not always fun, especially traveling the equator. But I'd say that was probably the worst. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds very scary.
Yeah.
I would have been a wreck. That sounds very scary. Yeah.
Did you have what gave you the sense that it could have something to do with the flight rather than just like she broke up with her boyfriend?
Well, I think it was also because it was around that time. Yeah, well, we were flying for several hours already over the Atlantic and everything seemed to be going pretty normal. That's where I got the thing that somebody may have called in because she wasn't hysterical for the first 4 hours of the flight. But
right.
something happened on the flight to make at least one or two of the flight attendants need to be cold and comforted and say, well, I mean, they were really huddling in a consoling mode. So I don't know what it was, but it was also the time of the 9/11. So a lot of people were really anxious about getting back on planes at that time. Yeah, security was definitely beefed up, and that was good. But you always wonder, if they're going to miss something, and that was one trip where I was worried something had happened. So nothing happened. We did land safely. It may have been just a threat, or maybe it was something else, but who knows? But I think your mind can play tricks on you. That's, I guess, the important lesson of this thing is to try to keep your mind calm when things don't go as smoothly as they should.
Yeah, and I guess for airline personnel, that time must have been really terrifying in general.
Yes.
One thing to be a willing tourist and another like to be having to be on an airplane day after day.
Yes. Now, the current situation is not good either. And I'm going to say this because since the pandemic, it seems like I have not been on a flight that hasn't had a 3, 5, or 7 hour delay. And last year, I took 2 flights on American, and they were both canceled. Yeah. So the cancellations and the trip interruptions. I also took a cruise to Mexico, and we got down there, and that was canceled. So we're in this heightened stage where things just don't go according to plan like they used to. So as they say on the news, pack a lot of patience when you travel these days, because it's much more challenging, at least lately, to travel anywhere because of all these interruptions. Things don't go smoothly at all. Yeah. You can almost expect that 1 out of 2 trips, you're going to get some kind of trip interruption, a canceled flight, or rebooking or something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hear that from other people. I'm hearing that continuously. It's concerning.
One of the things
and that they don't have enough staff.
Yeah.
I heard about people being stuck on the plane.
Yes.
They couldn't deplane because they didn't have enough staff. The pilot was so embarrassed to announce.
Right. They don't have enough staff, and they can't get you to the gate because all the gates are closed, and you sit. It's the worst thing to be on a plane for 7 hours and then have to sit on a hot plane without air conditioning because they have to turn the engine off for 3 hours waiting for a gate. I mean, it's silly, but these things happen, yeah.
I have another, I shouldn't say burning because it's about a cold place, but Antarctica?
Yes, yeah. Antarctica was definitely one of my favorite places to go because not only is it very unique, but I just gelled with, I mean, part of the any trip is meeting new people that you travel with. And on that particular trip, there were 4 of us in our own travel agency group, and then we combined it with 6 other people we met on the trip. And they were all great people. And the thing about Antarctica is there's no television or on the ships. You have to make your own entertainment. And the staff usually does some kind of card games and magician acts and things like that to keep you entertained. And sometimes they have some documentaries on DVD. But a lot of the things we did was to entertain ourselves and tell jokes and play games. And I thought that was a really great part of the trip, to put down your cell phone for a couple of weeks and be completely offline and really engage in conversation once again. It was a life-changing experience just because you were cut off from the world and learning the fine arts of conversation and game playing. I know you had a show on games, so
Yes.
yeah, and
Yes.
so it was
Yes.
great. It was so much fun, yeah. And of course, the scenery was incredible, and the wildlife, and seeing the penguins, and being someplace so exotic. First of all, it wasn't as cold as you would think. When I left Antarctica, it was you go up the peninsula, it was getting up to 30, 35 degrees Fahrenheit. I got to Boston and it was like 5 degrees. So it was colder in Boston.
That's funny.
So, yeah.
I just want to point out to you that I'm so I'm so touched and moved and impressed all these years by knowing how you have the gift of being able to talk with anybody and everyone. It's such an amazing gift.
That's impressive.
And I see it played out in your life. And so to me, that correlates with the travel. So as we're about to wrap up here, I just wanted to say that to you. Something I really love.
Sarah, I have one question I just have to ask David before we finish. And it's very practical, not related to any destination in particular. But I just have to know, going back to our very first podcast episode, how in the world do you sleep in all these different places and circumstances?
Yes. So, I will sometimes bring a sleeping aid with me, and I also have the blackout eye shades and the earplugs. And I've certainly been on some beds that have been somewhat uncomfortable over the years. I'm at a stage now that if I'm traveling on my own, I'll get the single supplement, because roommates, you just don't know if they're going to snore or get up early or do something that's going to make sharing a room difficult. But I did a lot of that in the past. And most of the time it actually worked out pretty good. But there were times that, I ran into issues. But for the most part, I haven't had a huge problem sleeping on the trip itself, because I think you're so busy during the day, you're so exhausted at night, you kind of fall asleep pretty quickly. Coming back, though, the jet lag is tough. There have been many trips, even the last trip I took to Scotland, where days passed before I felt like I was getting sufficient sleep again and getting into my own pattern. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, take melatonin. That's a good tip. Take a melatonin when you travel to reset your clock. Yeah.
I take that every day. Just
yeah.
I mean,
I've started to too. I think it helps. Yeah.
I tend to be pretty insomniac in general. So when I think about, traveling and being in different places, it's a little daunting. And my first number one idea about traveling is to go to Ireland and sleep in a castle,
Yeah.
which sounds very romantic, but I just hope the beds are comfortable.
Where are you going next, David? As our last question for you, where are you going
I'm
next?
going to Malta next, to the island of Malta in October. That's my next trip.
Okay.
Sort of a
I'm
culture-
jumping into your suitcase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Thank you, David. Thank
welcome.
you so much for your time and stories and wisdom. And thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, David.
My last remark is don't be afraid to travel, but just know that when you travel, things don't always go the way they're supposed to go. You have to be really flexible. That's the key thing to traveling, and to keep your patience.
Right.
And be open.
Wonderful.
To things. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you for being our first guest. And Sarah,
Now let's talk.
about something else.
We'd love to hear from you, our listeners, with any questions, any thoughts, responses, and comments, and also any ideas you might have for future episodes.
Yes, and you can reach us at stonesisterspodcast@gmail.com. That's Stone Sisters Podcast, all one word, @gmail.com. And we'd really love to hear from you.